Hi everyone, welcome, and thank you for coming to this very special talk by the 2020 DESIGN Canberra Designer-in-Residence, Kirstie Rea. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kate Nixon. I'm the Program Director at Craft ACT, the organisation that puts on DESIGN Canberra. I'd like to begin by paying my respect to the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the support we receive from our wonderful sponsors that enable us to put on the festival every year, including our government sponsors, the ACT Government, Arts ACT and the City Renewal Authority, our platinum sponsors, Rolf Classic BMW, Home by Holly, University of Canberra, the Prosecco Consortium and the Suburban Land Agency, and I'd also like to acknowledge our gold partner, the Alistair Swain Foundation. So it's my pleasure to hand over to board member of the Swain Foundation, acclaimed landscape architect, director of Harris Hogg Landscapes, curator of Contour 556, among many other things, Dr. Neil Hogg. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I'd also like to acknowledge custodians of the land we're meeting on. The land of the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri peoples. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And on behalf of the Alistair Swain Foundation, I'm delighted to welcome you here for Kirstie's talk about her recent work. The Swain Foundation is delighted to commence supporting DESIGN Canberra for 2020, and we look forward to continuing our association in 2021 when the planning for that event gets underway. Now, Alistair Swain AO was one of Canberra's leading architects and a lover of all things associated with Australian design. He was the founding director of Darryl Jackson Alistair Swain, and he contributed to the profession through his positions as President, Senior Counsellor and Life Fellow of the Australian Institute of Architects. He was a professorial fellow at UC and was the inaugural ACT Government architect. So really very much involved in the I suppose, the life and the design of Canberra. Coming here, I suppose, as a young man, he studied in Liverpool in the UK, came to Melbourne, met Darryl Jackson, and then sort of, Darryl said, well, go to Canberra, there's a job up there, you come and get us. He started supervising a job as a young architect. And the rest was history. Found Canberra, fell in love with it. I mean, and he travelled the world, obviously, but he always called Canberra home. Much like Kirstie's travelled here, there, everywhere with her glass, but she's based in Canberra. But Alice's architecture reflected light, colour, and humanity, and he could easily link the DESIGN Canberra 2020 theme of care to Alice's work. He was educated to believe that people were born equal and had a right to be heard equally. He believed that architecture and design was a genuine way of approaching humanity, to believe that everybody can contribute and be treated equally. And before his death in 2016, he bequeathed his estate to a foundation in his name, the Alistair Swain Foundation, to advance Australian architecture and design culture. And we've been, the board's been active this year, particularly in having a grants program and so on, which are looking to advance 2 or 3 aims. Look at the website if you're interested in applying for grants, research grants and so on. There's a couple of levels of grants, at a research level and a strategic level, and there's other opportunities too that might be available coming up in the future years. And the aim of the foundation is to provide an opportunity for those in Australian architecture and design related industries to conduct research in their chosen field. It aims to reward proven achievement of talented and deserving Australians with further opportunity in their pursuit of excellence for the enrichment of knowledge in architecture and all design disciplines in Australia. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Kirstie to talk about her recent work. As I said, Kirstie's a Canberra local with a multi-award international profile, and she's been an ongoing advocate for the development and success of Australian glass within the international arena, through her exhibiting practice, through teaching and through her advocacy for Australian glass artists throughout her career. Her kiln-formed and cold work recent works epitomise the elements of Australian contemporary glass that has drawn attention from around the world and the connection with the Australian natural landscape in its purest and most simple form. And of course, as Kate said, she's DESIGN Canberra's 2020 Designer-in-Residence. So please welcome Kirstie.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, and welcome here. Everyone today. Lovely to see so many familiar faces, but also some new faces too. I too would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri peoples. It's upon their ancestral lands that we meet, and I acknowledge their tradition of care for country that is so wise, precious, and now widely recognised. So thank you. The DESIGN Canberra Festival 2020 is in full swing. I hope you've been enjoying proceedings and found exciting and absorbing events to attend. I still can't believe how wide and inclusive the festival embrace is. That's really wonderful. The Craft ACT team is led by Rachel Coghlan, CEO of Craft ACT, the Craft and Design Centre, and Kate Nixon, the Program Director. These folks really do care. They care about what we do, the past, the present and the future, and what that future can hold for us, and importantly, ways to lead us there. So thank you. Thanks to Kate and Rachel and all who've worked towards making Design Canberra what it is. And thank you to all the participants in the festival events, whether you've opened your studio doors or your beautiful homes to the public, participated in a lecture, whatever. It all adds up to creating a festival that nurtures and endorses what we are so passionate about. That was last weekend at the very start of Bev's studio open day. Never has care been so much at the centre of our lives as it is now. I was really honoured to be asked to take up the role of Designer-in-Residence for Design Canberra 2020. The team came up with this theme, I believe, back in late 2019, way before the pandemic reared its head. I accepted the role in early 2020 as the summer fire chaos was still with us, and we were starting to hear about the first outbreak of the virus. And here's what I wrote as I developed the work with care. In the summer of 2020, care came quickly into focus with the Australian bushfire season. The horrific burning and tragic aftermath. The fires ravaged lives and livelihoods, land and wilderness and wildlife. Then with autumn, care took on another totally new meaning. In front of care was placed an S. Care became scare. With what we knew as care now became risk, concern and scare. To visit, to hug and to extend a hand was no longer an option. Care as we knew it now put us at risk, self-care embedded in care. Care is at a regulated distance. We now care with care. We give care with care. With care is a work made with this in mind. The form of the blanket is used as a generic symbol for comfort and care, but the glass blanket has an obvious fragility attached to it. The doorway structure represents the inside and outside, the comings and goings of our lives over the threshold. A stack of blankets symbolising ongoing care, whether coming or going. There's a slight awkwardness to the scale and materiality of this work, as life now is somewhat awkward. Glass is a material at the heart and core of my studio practice, and it calls for care. Care not only in handling the material, but embedded in an understanding of the material. The glass process is attached to explorations and to mastering the skills needed to work with it. We care about what we create and how we make. When care is missing, we know. The care with which we create is passed on in the object to those who collect it. The care we embed within the making reflects the care that those who taught us shared, passing on skills, processes and knowledge. Klaus Moyer, my professor, my friend, mentor, Klaus was so generous and giving with his knowledge, skills and sharing of his international connections and opportunities. He never ever felt challenged by his students' small successes, but lived and enjoyed those moments with us and taught us to do the same. He cared about how we made, how he made, what he made, and the respect Australia was gaining for contemporary glass. Klaus worked acknowledging what and who had gone before him, to possibilities in making and design that he had not approached in his own work. He understood the need to foster and mentor those who were also passionate about the material and making. That's a shot of Scott, myself and Klaus. On graduating, Klaus asked me to teach on the glass program at the school, which I did for many years. Teaching and mentoring has been a major part of my practice, and I've managed over the years to find a comfortable balance between making in the studio, teaching and mentoring. So how did the blanket form come about? For a semester in 2011, I was a visiting artist teacher at the Alberta College of Art and Design in Calgary, Canada. Distance has always allowed me to think with greater clarity about home and place, and what that distance means to me, and what that means to me. Living in another place allows me to compare places and reflect on them from a distance. My semester in Canada was a winter one, and Calgary is freezing, really cold. We had 6 weeks of below 30, and I think I walked home one day at -41. But it was an incredible experience. Cold it was, but I was so comfortable. I was cared for by my hosts, kept warm by excellent building design and heating, and the blanket form became the object of care, comfort, and initially thoughts of a blue sky back home and possibly a picnic. It spoke about the body, about inside and outside to me, and it went from being neatly folded to being loosely thrown across a chair through probably about 5 years or 6 years of making. These forms being created in the kiln over a number of firings, just relying on heat and gravity to help the glass take shape. Here the blanket form becomes towel, maybe skin. I was asked today to speak about how care comes into my art practice. But first I'd like to extend my thoughts in reference to just a few of my fellow makers who are part of the caring community that surrounds me. A healthy community equals care. Knowing their practices and work through long friendships and ongoing discussions over the years about what we make and why we make, I see care embedded throughout their creating processes, through their practices, and I acknowledge and appreciate their ideas and feedback that they so readily share with me. Bev Hogg has a wonderful ability to capture the essence and the life force and the importance of a spotted pardalote in our lives on the surface of a hand-built vessel, and to focus our attention on the critical need to be constantly respectful of our natural environment and understand that we share our spaces with nature, whether that be the city, suburbia, or beyond the urban edge. Her care and concern for this is always upfront in her work and her life. Harriet Swartrock and Matt Curtis, the dynamic duo, both having their own incredibly innovative practices. Both Matt and Harry are constantly researching and exploring new and old technologies, neon, plasma, formulating new colours from old recipes for the furnace, and bringing this knowledge into their new works. The care and time they take to achieve this and refine the new knowledge and how to use it really shines through in both their works. Scott Chaseling, with whom I worked for many, many years. I saw Scott over these years create work for so many other people, students, fellow artists, and for masters like Klaus, with incredible care and skill, and then switch seemingly very smoothly to producing his own innovative and exploratory works. And from conceptual developments to the realisation and resolution of works lies care. Here, for Mel Douglas, here it is focused on the incredible skills required to create work, to beautifully finish a surface, to have the amazing skill to engrave multiple simple lines to create new form for the eye, new ways of drawing and seeing. Mel's blown and engraved works are exquisite and immediately show us how her years of learning and caring about the marks she makes and how those marks are applied to the surface. Mel's understanding of what it takes to create a successful practice and such refined works speak clearly of the care and understanding of materials, processes, and everything attached to making. And I can't stress the importance of community around you. Friendship forms the ever-important community around us that cares, supports, and nurtures us. I'm speaking to an audience, mainly I think, who knows that to be a full-time artist isn't always an easy life to live. We don't switch off when we go home, when we go out, or even when we socialise. But it's kind of a beautiful thing too. So now just back to a little bit of background and a look back at some of the early work. I grew up here in Canberra. I studied at the then Canberra School of Art under Klaus Moyer and Neil Roberts' dream team, and graduated in 1986. think this is a photo from about 1985, I figure. In 1987, I set up a small studio in Kialago and am still there with a much expanded studio space. I was living rurally then, but had also had a childhood of being out and about around the ACT, mountains, rivers, hills and bushland. I felt comfortable out there then, as I do now. This time spent exploring places outside of the city has provided me with ongoing source of inspiration for thoughts around the importance of our natural world and how we can best fit into it. Earlier works reflected the wonder and awe I found in the detail of bush and the intensity of colour when pausing and looking closely. These small works explored the difference between inside and outside spaces, as do these works from a couple of years later. I was also intrigued by how nature, weather and time turned a built structure imposed onto a landscape into something visually acceptable and seemingly fitting into the landscape. At the core of my practice lies the desire to seek an understanding of our often tenuous connections to place. Hold is from a series of works in 2000, and it looks at the way places have a hold on us, as the expression is. How certain places wrap around us and hold on to us. In 2003, the fires changed places I thought I knew. I was away camping that weekend, so missed the disaster that it was. But nature kicks in, as it does, and the air cleared. First slide is a response to a volunteer program I was working on at the time out at Tipimbilla Nature Reserve. And whilst working on that program, I just watched life creep back, as is this work, Scent of Light. But I'm also interested in how the land responds to what we ask of it, and at times that's a lot. Fine Line 2 was made in response to a view while travelling to the southern end of Namadgi National Park via the highway rather than through the park. The intense agriculture was in stark contrast to the national park bushland that was practically on the other side of the paddock. The stark line boundary made me think about the fine line we face with intensive farming, clearing for farming, our survival, and balancing this with the areas for park and reserves, saving those areas of wilder country. Balancing the blades also looked at this balance we need to understand and to get right. The form of the time is abstracted from the tines that attach to much agricultural machinery, to our garden rakes and our forks. They mark and scar and contour place, changing the forms of landscape, the colours and the details. Channel 2 asks the question, how and where and when do we channel our energies and efforts to find a balance and create good sustainable change? And in between all this thinking, the need to pause, to reflect where we sit, and that can be anywhere, and how best we can lightly fit to our environment and our places. Walking in places beyond urban environments, seeking solitude and distance, photography and writing have increasingly become tools to inform my making. And it's only been in the last 3, maybe 4 years that I've felt a kind of confidence to incorporate some of these photographic images into my work. I always take my camera with me when I'm walking and have tried to capture the essence of a place. This Namadgi bush and light came from a time in Gojimbi Valley in 2009. I lived there for 5 weeks as artist-in-residence in Reddycut Cottage. The residency through Craft ACT's amazing parks and joint residency with ACT Parks, and it's underway right at present. You have 2 artists out there right now. In 2014, I undertook a residency in this cottage, set on the cliff of Cataract Gorge in Launceston. Not well while I was there, sadly. I was holed up in the 1896 gatekeeper's cottage, looking out the French doors to the other side of the gorge. I photographed these images reflected in the glass of the old doors. What struck me was that they told me about the place around me while I was still. Not just the view ahead, but what was behind me as the reflection, and also what was in front of me, the view through the glass. I was intrigued that a simple sheet of window glass could do this. These images inspired me to further explore what I could capture of place and my experience of being there with a sheet of glass. So in this work, the shadow of the eave of the cottage is actually the kind of darker section in the top left, with a little profile of gutter. And that was another one from the windows. So recently, a couple of years ago now, as I said, I started to turn these into works. And these two works were from 2018. And just another image taken into the surface of a sheet of glass. I walk now to stop, to be still. Here are some words from a show in Sydney last year titled Still Like Water. I walk to stop, to be still, a fluid stillness that plants my feet. They consider growing roots, a momentary transplant. Between clouds, trees, boulders, and a creek in a valley, the fragility of moments becomes transparent and tangible. This body of work explores the sculptural possibilities of a sheet of glass, heat, and gravity. Each work an abstraction of place, time, light, and lines. Pared back but infused with colour, drawn from the decorative elements that clothe and place the landscape. It is an abstraction of hills and valleys walked. The walk is not to the summits, but into the hills, around them and through their folds and interiors, through the trees and rocks. These works slowly give form to the relationship between the walking body and the body of place. As the pandemic took hold, my ramblings have been brought closer to home. Trips to the coast, the mountains were out. The message was, stay home. Sometimes those blank days in my diaries felt really, really good. Open to opportunity that was focused locally. Working in my studio sometimes felt like doing a residency in my studio. I didn't have to go anywhere. This is a work from this year, When the Local Comes Alive, where I've paired glass and the photographic image from Bicentennial Park in Queanbeyan together. Change. Exploring has been brought closer to home. The focus now local, as is my company. Restriction. With boundaries drawn in tighter, the areas I wander have been reduced. Concentrated. I return and I rewalk. I look again, look closer, and still love what I see amongst the plastic and numerous tracks of boots and bikes, and sometimes the track of a four-legged furry being. Being there. I record being there with my camera, a sheet of glass, and my body. The surface of the glass offering a reflection of what is behind me, where I've been, laid over the way forward seen through the glass, the two views stitched together. Reveal. Each moment of pause reveals new details and a wonder of place, moment, light and presence. Exploring alone in places beyond the suburban, place soaks deep under my skin and wraps around me. Back home, memory and of being there still cling to me. And these two works I've just finished and will be in my show that opens next Saturday. It's coming Saturday. And I've just included a couple of shots. This is me on the left holding up a sheet of glass outside my studio. And you can just see the reflection of the poplar trees in the glass, but also capturing that view through the glass. And just another shot from up in Bicentennial Park in Queanbeyan. It is the lure of blue that gets me out and about. That outsideness is always there in the doorway, on the threshold of something new. And then it's back to making, which is what I love as much as being out there. I'd like to conclude today with a teaching project I undertook at the Grace Early Learning Centre in Gungahlin. In 2015, I was invited to develop and undertake an art project with, I think they were 4 and 5-year-olds, over a couple of weeks. The centre takes the kids every day, without fail, rain, hail or shine, into the local bushland to explore, be free, discover and be creative, to spend time outside. The group walks together and it's not far, which I think is really important as it reinforces that nature is an integral and critical part of our city. They develop relationships with each other outside the built walls. They feel the day to touch and see what the natural world holds. Back at the centre, we made handmade paper from recycled centre paper over 2 weeks, and then another week painted on this paper what they remembered from these outside times. I titled the work The Eye, the Sky, which is kind of after Tim Winton's 1986 book, That Eye, the Sky, which is a beautiful little book. And I think that, you know, the most important thing we can do is to nurture and pass on the care that we have for whatever area that is into the next generations, and keep the passion about making going. So thank you, Craft ACT, very much for this opportunity to speak to you today. And thanks, Neil. Thanks, Kate. Rachel.
Thanks, Kirstie. We've probably got time for a few questions. If anyone people that you can view this beautiful work upstairs at Craft ACT, not today because we're closed, but Tuesday to Saturday. And then, of course, that Kirstie's exhibition is opening this Saturday out at Suki and Hugh Gallery in Bungadore.
Correct. Wonderful. You're all very welcome. And it will be on for a month.
Great. And hopefully you got a little card when you came in as well.
Yeah.
Kirstie, your affinity with nature is palpable each time you talk, and part of the answer came in telling of your childhood growing up in that environment. I start with the question, you know, does your art drive your love of nature or vice versa? And it's a yes-no question that isn't a yes-no answer. So do you want to talk just to that point of that integration between the two?
Yeah, sure, Peter. I think I can. I think I had a really creative mum, and while she was busy with 6 kids, creating stuff was part of what she totally encouraged us to do, whether that was build horse jumping courses around the back garden. We didn't own horses, but still, we were the horses. Or decorate the table before dinner, or make our own birthday cards. And I can remember one year crying because I had to make a birthday card to take to a party when I knew everyone else's was going to be bought. And she really, really, taught us to make and create. And, you know, up on Red Hill, when there wasn't any Garran or Hughes or anything beyond, I can remember going up there and making cubbies and inviting Mum up to have morning tea of berries and mud and I don't know, whatever. So I think she really nurtured that in all of us. Art certainly wasn't encouraged in my schooling. I mean, you could do art, but it wasn't taken very seriously as a subject. And I left school not knowing what I wanted to do. But I think that making and that... in fact, I found a 1963 school book, because Mum kept everything of ours, that said, I was 8, and it said, when I grow up, I want to be an artist or a painter. And I want to paint pictures to make people happy. So, I don't know where that came from. I don't know if that answers.
It does, and you do.
Right, and the other thing is that we never had parties at home. We were allowed to take 2 or 3 friends, and we went out to Paddy's River or Casuarina Sands, or the river was our sort of play area.
I'm interested that that story links with your work with those children at Grace.
Yeah, maybe. I thought that's just an amazing little program. Yeah. Any more questions? And
I have a very limited knowledge of glass making. What are the difficult parts in your work practice?
oh, okay, yeah, I didn't include any really technique shots. Getting to know how glass as a material reacts to heat. I suppose I work mainly in the kilns, I don't work in the hot shop, I'm not a glass blower. Getting to know the machines that make a mark and getting the most out of those machines and the most out of heat, I suppose, in a very simple answer. But it's material that always lets you know when you've pushed it too far. Yeah, there are times when we do push it too far. So yeah, just getting to know the material really, really well. And did you have a question?
Well, I think it follows quite nicely. It was a question about your early practice being, I mean, all your practice is so incredibly conceptual. Really appreciate the thoughts and the words that always underpin the way in which you then cast that into, cast it into the making. But your earlier work, I suppose, was more solid, that you saw through translucencies and depth of light, perhaps. And now you're moving to a very thinness, which is very fragile and fluid. Where do you think you'll go back to the solidity of glass at some point, or you just let it take you where?
I don't know is the answer, Anne. I really don't know. I thought that when I sort of reduced my making material to a sheet of glass, I thought it might become simpler. And I was very ignorant really of what then a sheet of glass can throw back at me, as in folding it and compressing it. I might, I don't know. I don't know the answer. Mel.
I'm just going to make a comment. I think it was a very beautiful way to kind of tie up your project working with Craft Day City, because you do work with such care with whatever you do, whether it's making your own work or teaching someone else. So, I'm proud to be one of your students, ongoing, and I think that Canberra's really lucky, Australia's really lucky to have someone that's taken on Glass's legacy and has committed to their own practice and the practice of others by taking care. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mel. That means a lot. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming along.